Hey, it's Ryan Holiday. Welcome to another episode of Ask Daily Stoic. You send in your questions about Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, about reading, writing, philosophy, ancient history, whatever it is. We kick stuff around. You can send those questions at info@dailystoic.com. The more specific your questions, the better. Steve wrote in and he said, how can I get my wife interested in Stoicism? Why do you want your wife to be interested in Stoicism? I think the Stoic quip would be like, focus on yourself, leave other people to their own development. Sometimes I think we project our own needs on other people. There's a Zen saying like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I think like Stoicism is not an evangelical religion. You're not supposed to convert people. It doesn't need to be this thing you force on other people. It's there for the people that want it, but it's there primarily for you to be interested in improving yourself. So I could only think about how I got my wife into Stoicism. I remember when we met, I think we met in 2007. I had actually just read Marcus Aurelius. I remember I bought it at Borders. I bought it on Amazon, and I was reading it, and I was talking to her about it, and she was so interested from my conversation that she went to Borders and bought a copy. Borders is no longer in business, but we went through the copy a couple months ago, and you can still see like this faded out receipt inside the book. She went and got it because she was interested in it, not because I forced it on her. I don't think this is something you can force on people. And even if you could, I don't think it would work. My evidence for this is Seneca, one of the greatest Stoics ever, was assigned to teach Stoicism to Nero, and it didn't work out well. We wrote this Daily Stoic email about a famous statue of the two of them. You can kind of see the statue is like Seneca trying to teach Stoicism to Nero, and he's just like sort of sitting there like, this is Nero, and he won't pay attention. To me, the lesson of that statue is like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And so when I think about how you might teach it to a wife or a friend or a kid, I think it all comes down to the material is there, the wisdom is there, you model it, you can tell them about it, but you can't do anything more than that. And ultimately you want to focus on what you control, which is what is the philosophy doing for you. All right. Karen wrote in, she just graduated from college. She's heading out into the world. What sort of advice would I have for someone getting started? I don't know. I think when I think about my path, obviously education was important. Obviously, sort of luck and privilege was important. But the big sort of movers in my career were people that I met, that I talked to, that I developed relationships with, that ended up becoming sort of mentors or advisors to me. What I would think about is, in this sort of, you're a fresh graduate, you're young, you're just getting started, I'd think about like, whose work do you admire, who has done what you are trying to do, and what advice could you reach out and ask of them. So like, the fact that you wrote into this thing is exactly the kind of thing that you use to kickstart a thing. So a mentorship isn't this thing that magically happens, but it's also not like an official sort of ordained thing. It's something that evolves. So when I think of like my relationship with Robert Greene, who taught me how to write, who gave me a lot of my big breaks as a writer, it was like that started from sort of random email exchanges, and then they built from there. And I took like a little job working for him, and I did well, and then a bigger job. You don't magically get your dream job. In many cases, you make that job. And so the willingness to start small, the willingness to sort of try things out and reach out without any sort of ulterior motives is, I think, really key to developing the network or the relationships that ultimately, set up where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do. So Ben wrote that he's laid up with a broken leg. How does he sort of make use of this time? Any thoughts on sort of recovering from something like that? I'm just writing now in this book, Lives of the Stoics. There's a philosopher, Crates of Malice, Mallus, not Malice, although that would be a cool place to be from. He's in Rome on a diplomatic mission, and he falls in a sewer grate, and he breaks his leg. I think he's from Rhodes or something. He's not from Rome, but he's in Rome, falls, breaks his leg, and he's laid up for several weeks. And it's being several months, and being laid up for several months is when he starts giving discourses on Stoic philosophy. The philosophy is sort of so revelatory and new in Rome that it's a sensation. These pamphlets, this may well be the introduction of Stoicism. It had been popular in Athens and in Greece, but it had not made its way all the way to Rome. And so it may well be that Stoicism's first introduction to the Roman Empire, the philosophy it is sort of incorporated into the DNA of the empire that changes the course of the world and history, comes from the exact scenario you're in. So I think one of the things the Stoics would think about is like, sure, it sucks you broke your leg. It probably hurts really bad. I'm sorry that this happened to you. But they'd say, like, what good can come of this? How can you use it? And I remember in 2011, I quit my job in American Apparel. I moved across the country. I was all set to start writing my first book. I wanted to write a book on media. I was riding my bike to the gym in New Orleans, and the tire got stuck in the streetcar track, and I went over the handlebars, and I landed on my left elbow, and I fractured a bone in my elbow. So it was in a sling for something like 6 weeks. I couldn't exercise, I couldn't swim, and I had to type with one hand, and I was going out of my mind. But I used that time. I went on these long walks because that's how I got my exercise. That's how I got outside. I couldn't do as much writing. I had to do more reading, and I had to do more research. And I don't think that book would have ended up being the book that it was if it wasn't for that experience. I wanted to rush right into it. I wanted to get it all done, but it forced me to take it slow. It reminded me of, it made me overall a better writer and a better person. I am almost certain that you will look back on this injury as being sort of less painful and more meaningful than it feels to you now. But the question would be like, what can you get out of this experience? What can you learn? What can you do? Who can you reconnect with? There's a study that I talk about in The Obstacle is the Way. They did this study on Canadian athletes about how sort of potential career-ending injuries often were the fodder for what they call post-traumatic growth. Even if it didn't make them better, the rehabbing process they didn't emerge stronger from it. They appreciated the game more, or they appreciated their teammates more, or they understood the power of leadership more, or made them more patient, or made them more grateful. Like, this injury can do that for you if you choose to let it, but that ultimately is up to you. So that's what I would think. I'm sorry. I hope you feel better soon. Great question, though. Appreciate everyone who wrote in. Talk to you next week. This was awesome. You can send your questions at info@dailystoic.com. Follow us at Daily Stoic pretty much everywhere. Subscribe below on YouTube. Leave a comment if you want. And of course, as always, I hope you get the Daily Stoic email, which you can check out at dailystoic.com. Thanks.